In Moscow, they began to realize that the special military operation is not developing according to Putin's plan. The Kremlin has issued a new manual in which it is said that negotiations with Trump and Ukraine are inescapable, and supporters of the continuation of the war to the borders of Poland are now called traitors. In fact, it turns out that for 4 years Russia fought in vain, and hundreds of thousands of Russians died in vain. Russia's economy is beginning to buckle. Businesses have been crippled by high interest rates. Government borrowing costs have soared, and Economy Minister Maxim Reshetnikov warned in June that the country was on the brink of a recession. Warnings are mounting over a potential avalanche of bad debt that could trigger a financial crisis. Small pockets of protests are emerging. Recently, hundreds of people gathered in St Petersburg Square to sing an outlawed song calling for Putin to be overthrown. Meanwhile, Ukraine has been aggressively ramping up its drone attacks on Russian oil refineries, hammering the country's petrol supplies. Recently, the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation brought charges against 22 members of the anti-war committee of the Russian Federation, including Mikhail Khodorkovsky, for allegedly preparing a coup d'etat, violent seizure of power, and overthrow of the constitutional order in the country. With Vladimir Putin's rise to power, Russia has become a totalitarian state, and the dictator himself is increasingly wary of losing control of the country. Experts say the fear of a coup is a sign of the weakness of his regime. After the assassination of the leader of the Wagner PMC, Yevgeny Prigozhin, in 2023, which ended in his death, the Kremlin tightened security measures and control over military structures. Khodorkovsky, who spent 10 years in a Russian prison, emigrated to Europe and founded the Anti-War Committee in 2022. He denies any involvement in military actions against the Kremlin, a prime minister appointed by Putin, courts, and a parliament whose legitimacy is questionable. This is the reality of Russia, Khodorkovsky said. Analysts say Putin's fear may stem from the lack of a clear successor in the event of his death or removal from power. The Kremlin is trying to discredit the opposition to avoid possible destabilization. Angela Stent of Georgetown University emphasized, the regime wants to show that the West is trying to divide Russia. Moscow uses such information campaigns whenever tensions rise within the country. Separately, journalists note that Russia's economic weakness increases the risks for the ruling regime. According to Thomas Keating of the Royal Joint Institute for Defense Studies, it is this vulnerability that may push external players to take more active actions against Moscow. Former United States Ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst, said recently that the Russian dictator is paranoid and Putin himself is looking for enemies to strengthen his regime.
World climate leaders are now conceding that the global warming will shoot past the hard limit they set a decade ago, breaching what they consider a danger zone, but they are not conceding defeat. According to Associated Press, United Nations officials, scientists, and analysts are saying all is not lost because even though the world will stay that in danger zone for decades, global temperatures can eventually be forced back down below the red line they set in the Paris Climate Agreement. It's called overshoot. The limit, initially agreed in the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, is to prevent global temperatures from reaching or exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times. The figure is based on temperatures averaged over a decade and is now at about 1.3 degrees Celsius and even exceeded the 1.5 mark for a year last year. The risks including global extinction of coral reefs, exponential growth of killer heat waves, triggering tipping points for irreversible changes in the Amazon basin. Ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica and maybe even the entire Atlantic Ocean current system, according to a special 2018 UN report that showed how 1.5 starts the danger zone. For years UN officials have insisted that 1.5 is still alive. But now, even though they insist the goal is still pertinent, Those same leaders in the last few weeks are acknowledging that at least for a few years or more likely decades the 1.5 mark will be in the world's rear-view mirror. The idea behind overshoot is that temperatures will push past the 1.5 mark, but will be reduced over time. The hope is that once the world stops putting heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere from burning coal, oil, and natural gas, then natural carbon sinks such as trees and oceans that suck the carbon pollution out of the air will bring levels down. Add to that hopes for new technology that would pull carbon dioxide out of the air. Once the concentration of carbon in the air goes down, temperatures will too, eventually.
Here at United Nations climate negotiations in Belém, Brazil, on the edge of the Amazon, we're seeing a change in the discussion of what our future is going to look like. Ten years ago, the world set a limit, a red line in the sand, saying the globe should not warm more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. The trouble is, we're knocking on that red line, and last year we actually passed it for a year. Globally, the average temperature over a decade is 1.3 degrees Celsius, so that's really close.
But in the final hours, we landed a deal. $1 trillion a year by 2050. Major economies announced deep emissions cuts.
As climate disasters rip double digits off GDP. To falter while
over 1.5 degrees, we see the chances of coral reef going extinct much higher. We see the chances of other tipping points, as they call them, such as the start of irreversible melt in Greenland and Antarctica. And we're even talking exponentially increasing the killer heat waves we have now. In other words, far more. Instead of just going up slightly, it goes shooting up.